All right, microphone, are you working? It looks like you are. Boop boop ba doo. Hello there, and welcome to another live stream. Here we're doing a Q&A, and so just if you have some questions, let me know in the chat. Let me know where you're watching from, and if you have any questions, let me know. Let me make sure we're going on the YouTubes. It looks like we are. On my end, it looks like there's a bit of a delay, but I'm hoping that my microphone is working out. I have a new audio setup, so I'm hoping that it works out. So even though it looks like there's a delay on my end, let me know if like the audio and video is actually synced up, because I've been having problems with this lately. But anyway, like I said, let me know where you're watching from, what part of the country you're from. If you have any questions, let me know in the chat. We'll get to those. Jenny's coming in from Canada. Hi, Jenny. From Florida. Hi in Florida. Thanks for tuning in. And then a few people from India. And so Ram has a good question about bleeding. So we will get to that because that sounds like a really interesting question. Before that, I thought I'd do a quick rant about how to be a good acupuncturist, the secret to being a good acupuncturist. So that's maybe something I'll do a little rant first, and then we'll get into the actual questions, and that'll give people a chance to put some questions in the chat that we can get to. Hi, Danielle. Thanks for being here from the UK. And Casper. Hi, Casper. Happy New Year. It's a regular New Year, 2023, and then we have the Year of the Rabbit coming up, I think on the 20th. Casper is from the Netherlands. Hi, Casper. Hi, Elizabeth from Chicago. Jacqueline from San Diego. That's really cool. Kind of jealous of San Diego right now. I'm in Colorado, and I think it's like 20 degrees. It's snowing, so this is one of those things. If I don't last for very long, that's why. Denver tends to be very dry as it is, but now since it's cold and I have the heat on, it's even drier. So I've noticed that I can't talk for a long time, especially because I have such a loud, shouty voice that with all the dryness, it's difficult for me to talk for more than an hour when I do these things. So Ramoncita from California, hi. More from San Diego. Thanks for being here. So again, yeah, thanks to everyone for being here from the various places. If you have any questions you want to ask, put them in the chat below. We have a good one about bleeding, so we'll get to that. But first, let's talk about, it's a new semester, so let's talk about how do you be a good acupuncturist. And this is just a little rant I had in my head when I was drinking too much caffeine. So let's see how this goes. So it's a new year, new you. It's a new semester. You're really excited, and you want to be an awesome acupuncturist. You want to be great. You want to be a wizard. You want to be a Jedi Knight. You want to be a divine, feminine goddess who can heal the world. How do you do it? How do you be great? What's the secret? Well, spoiler alert, it's actually kind of boring and not that exciting. So when we look at this book, The Secret to Chinese Pulse Diagnosis by Bob Flaws, he has a really good quote in the beginning that goes something like, "The masters are not masters because they have secret knowledge that other people don't. Rather, the masters are masters because they've mastered the fundamentals." Actually, he didn't say it like that. What he really said, that's just how I remember it in my head. What he really said was, "Beginners think that masters have some special secrets to which they are not yet privy, but that's rarely the case. Mastery always means mastery of the basics. Unfortunately, all too often it is human nature to be impatient with the basics and try to jump to seemingly higher, more exciting planes." And so I think that's very common, especially with Westerners, that whenever you see someone who's really good at something, you want to ask, what's the secret? Like, oh, you lost a bunch of weight. What's your secret? Oh, this soup tastes really good. What's your secret? And really, there is no secret. The masters are masters because they've mastered the basics. So when I was in middle school and high school, I played the saxophone. So how do you become really good at playing the saxophone? Well, you practice the fundamentals. You practice scales to get your fingering and coordination, scales and arpeggios. You practice long tones to develop your embouchure and develop your tone. And it's doing those simple things over and over for a long period of time. That's what makes you good. And the problem is, that's really boring. It's not sexy. It's most people want to jump ahead. It's like, I want to just play beautiful music. And it's like, that's not how it works. You have to start with these scales and arpeggios and put in that long, boring work. Or say someone is a master martial artist. How did they become a master? Was it that some mysterious figure descended from the mountain and imparted to them the secret knowledge that here's how you do the wuxi finger hold? And once they had that secret knowledge, now they're a master? Well, no, if you've ever done martial arts, that's not how it works. The way people became masters is they practiced the fundamentals. They practiced the stances so that they had a good foundation. They practiced basic strikes over and over. I knew a guy who did Bagua Zhong, and he was like, I stand in horse stance for half an hour a day, and he does palm strikes. He says, if you're a beginner, do 1,000 palm strikes every day. If you're more advanced, do 2,000 palm strikes every day. And again, that's not exciting. It's not sexy. Most people are like, I want to learn how to fight. I want to do these cool moves. And it's like, you can't do those until you've had the fundamentals, until you've mastered the basics. And it turns out that's why the masters are so good, is because they're good at the basics. So then we have this question of, if we're trying to be good acupuncturists, we're trying to be good TCM docs, what are the fundamentals that we have to master? Well, it's this kind of stuff. In TCM, these are our fundamentals. And again, it's like, this stuff, it's actually kind of boring. Like memorizing point location is kind of boring. Memorizing your Zongfu patterns is kind of boring. But those are the fundamentals that you have to master. You can't just skip ahead to do like, oh, I'm going to use the secret technique, the secret 5 needle technique to heal my patients. Like, that's not how it works. You still have to master those fundamentals. And it turns out we can actually break this down into separate skills within Chinese medicine. So say you want to be a master at taking the pulse. This is something that when I talk to people in clinic, everybody wants to be better at taking the pulse. And so we have this book, The Secret of Chinese Pulse Diagnosis. Do you want to know what Bob Flaw's secret to Chinese pulse diagnosis is? He says that the first step is you must memorize the word-for-word definition of each of the 28 pulses. That's the secret. You sit down and memorize the basic information. That's how you get good at pulse. And it makes sense, because it's like, if you say, oh, this person has a soggy pulse, how can you say that a person has a soggy pulse if you don't know the definition of soggy? And I've had this happen in the clinic where students will come up and be like, oh yeah, the patient has a pulse that's deep and soggy. And it's like, I know you're bullshitting me, because the definition of a soggy pulse, it's by definition a floating pulse. You can't have a deep, soggy pulse. So you're telling me something without actually knowing the definition of a soggy pulse. And so when it comes to pulse diagnosis, that's the fundamentals, or that's the basics that you have to learn, is memorizing the word-for-word definition of these pulse images. If I were to add in a number 2, you have to practice taking pulses. That's how you get good, is by putting in a lot of reps. So let's say you take 10 pulses a day, every day. Take the weekends off, so you don't go crazy. So you take pulses every day, 5 days a week. 10 pulses a day, that's 50 pulses a week. That's 200 pulses a month. After 6 months, you've taken 1,200 pulses. Let's just round it down to 1,000. Do you think if you've taken 1,000 pulses, you'll get better at pulse diagnosis? I mean, I think it's almost unreasonable to think that you wouldn't be better. But that's how you get good at pulse, is you master the fundamentals, as in knowing the definitions of the pulses, and then you put in the reps. Let's take another example. Is a lot of people talk about being able to feel chi on the needle. And this was always a very mysterious thing to me. It's like, oh, when people say, oh, I feel the chi, or like, oh, I'm able to guide the chi up the channel. How do people do that? Well, there's really like no mysterious secret or anything like that. If you want to feel chi, you just have to do qigong every day for a long time. Maybe just a couple years to start feeling chi. And so that's what I did, is I started doing qigong for half an hour every day. And after a year or two, it's like, oh, now I can actually feel the chi. Now I can actually feel the point. It's like, it used to be like when you start out with point location, they're like, it's in the depression proximal to the bone. And you're like, is that a real depression? Because I don't feel anything. Well, after I was practicing point location for years and after I was doing Qigong for years, and it's like, oh yeah, I can actually feel depression now. It just takes a lot of work and a lot of reps. So you want to do that. What kind of Qigong should you do? I don't think it matters. For me, I did like 10 minutes of standing meditation every day, and then I did either Hua To 5 Frolics or something basic like 8 brocades or something like that. I think the type of Qigong that you do doesn't matter. It's just the fact that you're doing it every day, that's what gets you good. And so that's kind of my point here, is that if you want to be really good, those are the things you have to do. You have to master the fundamentals, and the way you do that is by putting in the time doing reps. And it turns out not a lot of people want to do that because it's really boring. There's this other quote I like that I found on Twitter where this person says, 90% of success can be boiled down to consistently doing the obvious thing for an uncommonly long period of time without convincing yourself that you're smarter than you actually are. And so it's not about learning the secrets, what's the secret technique. It's about doing the obvious thing, but doing it for a long time. So a lot of people here think that I'm really smart. Spoiler alert, I'm not very smart. I'm not a smart person. I don't have a photographic memory. I haven't studied with any great masters. What I have done is I've read the same basic textbooks over and over for 10 years. And because I've been putting in that work, I know these books really well. So if somebody says, I have a patient that isn't lactating, how do I promote more breast milk? Well, I'm like, get out your CAM, this stupid book that you bought in your second semester of school, turn to page 454, and there's a section on insufficient lactation. That will give you the knowledge you need to know in order to promote lactation. But spoiler alert, with that one, I think with promoting lactation, it lists the point stomach 28, Rugen. I think that's a typo. It should say stomach 18, which is Rugen, which makes more sense. You wouldn't use a point on the lower abdomen to promote lactation. You would use a point in the 5th intercostal space. But anyway, that's how you get good. This book. How many times have I gone through each section of this book in the last 12 years? There's not some secret method to learning this stuff. It's just spending the time and taking the effort, and that's why I kind of make fun of people who sell their textbooks right after they graduate. Because how are you going to get good if you've thrown away the fundamentals? So I think that's kind of the secret of how you become a good acupuncturist, or how you become good at anything, whether you just want to be good at acupuncture or whether you want to be good at the specific, the subset of skills like pulse diagnosis, point location, needle technique. What you need to do is think about the fundamentals and master those by practicing over and over for a long time. And again, that's not exciting, that's not sexy, it's very boring, but it's how you do it. And I think a lot of people try to skip this step. And so, nothing against other styles of acupuncture. I know a lot of people who practice other styles, and they're very good at them. They're very effective because they spent years mastering that style. But I feel like I see a lot of students who get into the second year of their program, and they start to drift off into other directions. They want to do a different style, or they want to start incorporating things like crystals, essential oils, and things like that. And the way I see that is they're looking for a secret. They're looking for a shortcut. They haven't put in the work to learn the fundamentals. Chinese medicine isn't working for them, so they're looking for the secret somewhere else. And to me, it's kind of like, you couldn't get regular Chinese medicine to work for you. Reading a book on sacred geometry is not going to give you the secret and suddenly make you an effective acupuncturist. If you want to learn master tongue points, that's cool, but honestly, when you go through school, you learn 361 points on the regular channels plus 40 extra points. You learn 400 acupuncture points. If you can't make it work with those 400 acupuncture points, learning more points probably isn't going to help you. And so So that's just a thing. Or I get a lot of students in their like second or third year, and they're like, oh yeah, I just like to use my intuition. And to me, that's another one where it's like, I kind of feel like that's an excuse for you being lazy. Because I think there is such a thing for intuition. So another quote is from Lonnie Jarrett's book, Manifesting Destiny. Manifest something like that, from Lonnie Jarrett's 5-element book. And he says, when he talks about intuition, he says, when theoretical knowledge and practical experience combine in such a way that you can act unconsciously, that is called intuition. So there are two parts of intuition. You need to have theoretical or academic knowledge. You've mastered the fundamentals that are in the books. And then you have a background of practical experience. You've applied that experience enough times that those two things meld together, and so you can just act without thinking. That's intuition. If you're in your second year of school, you don't have intuition. You have to master the fundamentals first before you can have intuition. You have to apply those fundamentals in the real world in order to have intuition. If you come to me and say, I practice according to my intuition, I interpret that to mean that you're just going to ohm a few times and hope that the divine light of the universe beams the answer into your head. And that's not how the masters became masters. The masters became masters by focusing on the basics, and there's no shortcut to that. So that's my rant about how you become a good practitioner of Chinese medicine, how you become a good acupuncturist. Let's get into questions. I was going to try to plug my email list. So if you want to get more information on Chinese medicine, subscribe to the email list below. You'll get updates on when new videos come out. And also, I occasionally send out articles like study tips, tips for opening a practice, or book recommendations and things like that. So if you want more TCM content, subscribe to the email list below. Let's get into questions. So there was a good one up here from Ramamurti, who says, hi Nicholas, how are you? I'm doing very well, thank you for asking. I'm hoping my cat's doing okay. I had to lock him in the other room, and he's been digging up the carpet. So I hope he can survive for an hour by himself. From South India, that's awesome. My geography isn't very good. I'm not entirely sure where Balu is. I spent some time in Calcutta in Western Bengal, but I don't know if I don't think that's southern India. Also, I feel like in America, most of our knowledge of India is more like northern India, so a lot of the food that we eat is actually northern Indian food, so like Navratan Korma and stuff like that. Anyway, I want to know about the cause of heavy bleeding during menstruation, especially during the menopause stage, followed by leukorrhea according to TCM concept. So this is kind of interesting. So when we talk about bleeding in Chinese medicine, at least when we talk about this type of internal bleeding, not bleeding due to injury and trauma, like I fell and scraped my knee or somebody stabbed me in the shoulder, but if we're talking about more internal types of bleeding, like nosebleed, vomiting blood, coughing up blood, blood in the urine, blood in the stool, heavy menses, either prolonged menses that happens for a long time, heavy menses where there's a large volume of bleeding, or even things like spotting between periods. Those are the types of bleeding we're talking about here. And basically in TCM there are 3 or 4 or 6 causes of bleeding depending on which book you're reading. And it's just we break them down a little bit differently. So one cause of bleeding is stagnation. This is actually kind of weird for people to conceptualize, that blood stagnation can lead to bleeding. And maybe the way you can visualize it is if the blood is stagnant, it's not moving, then as the blood comes through, it has to go around the point of stagnation. And so when it goes around, that blood moves outside of the vessel, and that's bleeding. So stagnation can cause bleeding. So if you have a lot of bleeding with purple clots, a lot of sharp stabbing pain, you have a purple tongue and a choppy pulse, that might be bleeding due to stagnation. Another cause of bleeding is bleeding due to heat. Heat is very yang. Heat causes things to speed up. And so when you have heat, that can cause the blood to speed up, and the blood speeds up so much that it begins to move recklessly or frenetically outside of the vessels. And so that's bleeding due to heat. And so sometimes we'll even talk about seeing this in severe febrile diseases, when you get like, think about like tuberculosis and people are coughing up blood, or people start to have nosebleeds or blood in the stool. When we talk about Wenbing and the 4 levels, when you get to blood level heat, there's a lot of bleeding involved because the heat is speeding up the blood and causing it to move outside of the vessels. So then the third one is deficiency. That, if you remember back to our fundamentals, when we talked about the functions of qi, one of the functions of qi is containment. It's supposed to hold things in, hold in the fluids, hold in the blood. So if there's deficiency, then qi can fail in its function of containment and the blood leaks out of the vessels. So that's another one. We could also say cold. When I say there might be 4 causes of bleeding, we could say that cold is another cause. But basically, we could lump this in with one of the others. Either we have cold that causes stagnation, and so we have bleeding due to stagnation, or when we say cold, we mean deficiency cold. And so like spleen yang deficiency cold leads to deficiency bleeding, where the yang qi can't hold the blood inside the vessel. So that's another thing. And then if we wanted to say there are even more causes of bleeding, we could break it down further and say when we have bleeding due to heat, it's either excess heat or deficiency heat. So we could have excess heat, excess fire, causing the blood to speed up and move outside the vessels, or we could have yin deficiency heat, causing the blood to speed up and move outside the vessels. So those are kind of the possibilities when we start to look at this bleeding during menstruation. Those are possibilities, and so we would have to break that down by a pattern diagnosis, and there are going to be possibly different points, but definitely different herbs that we would use for this type of bleeding. So we'd want to know bleeding due to stagnation. We might see a lot of clots, a lot of sharp pain in the lower abdomen, a wiry or choppy pulse, a purplish tongue. Those would all tell us there's stagnation, and maybe that's why the bleeding is happening. If there's bleeding due to heat, we would see heat signs, like the patient is hot, the patient is feverish, the pulse is rapid, the tongue is red. Those would be heat. And then we have to differentiate it into excess heat versus deficiency heat. So when we say the pulse is rapid, if the pulse is rapid and thin, as in the vessel is thin in diameter, that could be a sign of deficiency. If the tongue is red but it has little to no coat, that could be a sign of deficiency heat versus excess heat. And then bleeding due to deficiency, this is usually like the blood would be more thin and pale. The person would be tired. It's usually like a yang deficiency cold, so the pulse would be slow, the tongue would be pale, things like that. So we would have to break that down into what actual pattern is happening. But if this is happening during menopause, usually menopause is characterized by yin deficiency. And so that's why patients during menopause, they tend to have like hot flashes, night sweats. That's usually yin deficiency. So that might be where I would look first. The leukorrhea could be a little bit different. Sometimes leukorrhea is damp heat coming out, or it could be, again, like some sort of deficiency where instead of the qi not holding in the blood, the qi can't hold in the fluids, and we get either leakage of fluids, or we could even say leakage of essence, things like that. It could be like a Buzhong Ichitong pattern where things aren't rising upwards, things like that. So basically, to summarize this, there are a lot of different possibilities, but those are some of the pathomechanisms there, so you'd want to break it down. But again, if you're in herbs or you're doing the fundamentals, this is a good review to know. You want to know the various causes of bleeding. And I think that normally in practice, like if you're just in a regular, at least in the West, if you're in a regular practice, people usually don't come in with coughing up blood. Like if you have a patient that's vomiting blood or coughing up blood, you probably should send them to the ER. So when we see bleeding in practice, we're probably going to see these issues of menstruation. So either Prolonged periods. Normally a period should last like 3 to 5 or maybe even 7 days. If it's lasting longer than that, if you're getting 8, 9, 10 days of bleeding, we would say that's prolonged menses. There may be one of these causes of bleeding. If the amount of blood is excessive, and I think we have actual definitions of there, like, oh, it should be 30 to 70 milliliters of blood. I'm not sure anybody, I suppose if you have one of those Diva cups, you could actually measure how much blood is coming out each day. But if it's like you're constantly changing pads or constantly changing tampons, we could say, oh, there's a lot of blood coming out. That would be excessive menstruation. Or another possibility is spotting between periods. Metrorrhagia. I think menorrhagia is heavy periods. Metrorrhagia is bleeding between periods. There's a Chinese term I think we use here is like spotting and flooding, or trickling and flooding. So during the period that's flooding, there's a lot of blood coming out, and then at the period between, at the time between the periods, the blood is trickling out. We call that flooding and trickling. That would be another type of bleeding. I think that's usually bleeding due to deficiency. So those are the types of bleeding I think you would commonly see in a clinic. That when we go over Wenbing, we might talk about using rhinoceros horn to treat blood level heat where a person is deliriously feverish. I'm not sure you would see that in clinic, and if you do, send them to a hospital. Don't use rhinoceros horn. Can you provide a lecture on Zong Fu patterns and how to differentiate one from the other? I would like to do that eventually, but that's like a 6-month project. Like that's like an entire semester-long class, and so to actually make lectures on that would take a while. So a lot of times when I make these videos, it might take me like a week. I just made what I thought was going to be a simple video on a 4-point needle technique. It actually took 5 days of like full-time. Like when I say 5 days, I mean like 40 to 60 hours to actually create that video. And so to do that, to go through each of the 12 organs, like it's going to take a while. So that's something I want to do eventually. But right now I'm working on herb stuff. I have maybe another month of finishing up herb stuff. Then I'm going to go and do the channel stuff. A lot of people have been asking me to do the rest of the acupuncture channel. So I'm going to do that. And actually, that's a good point, that if you want to learn about those Zong Fu patterns, going through those acupuncture channel videos can be very helpful, because at least with the yin organs, that front part, we talk about the functions and characteristics of the organs, and that's going to help you with your Zong Fu pattern diagnosis when you know what are the functions and characteristics of the spleen, what are the functions and characteristics of the heart. That will help you understand your Zong Fu patterns. So that's something you can do in the meantime, but that's something that to make those videos, it would take a while. Hi, Adam. Thanks for coming in from Poland. Happy New Year. Ria says, hi, do you use Twina Shatsu in most of your sessions yourself? Yes. And I think I'm kind of weird. I think that most people don't do that, but I really like doing that. That's just because before I got my acupuncture license, I got a massage license, and so I just naturally incorporated that into it. And my personal belief is that it's very helpful, that one, it just helps the person relax. It's something they like doing, but when you start off with that rolling, that kind of relaxes them, and then the chi can move a lot better when you do that Twina. So it's like if a person has a musculoskeletal complaint, like they have like, I have stiff neck or I have neck pain, then I'm definitely going to do manual work on the neck to loosen things up and then stick the needles in. But sometimes even if a person is coming in with something not musculoskeletal, if they're coming in with digestive stuff or other things, ideally I like to do a little bit of Twina just to kind of prepare the body for the needles. I will say that most people don't do that, partially because it takes a lot of time. And so it's kind of like if you want to run multiple treatment rooms, if you want to run 2 or 3 treatment rooms at a time, you can't do that unless you hire somebody else to do it. If you want to, condense your treatment time down into 45 minutes, you probably can't do that. Some people don't want to come in for an hour or for 90 minutes. They just want to come in, get their needles in, and leave, and then you wouldn't do that. Some people, it's physically difficult for them to do it. So I've known, like, especially not to be mean about this, but especially smaller women, I've known several that say they just can't do it. That 15 minutes of Twina and it feels like their arms are going to fall off, so they just can't do it. For me and my constitution, that's never been a problem. I can do deep tissue massage all day and not get tired, but that's because I weigh like 220 pounds at this point. So it's not very difficult for me. So that might be another limiting factor of, are you physically able to do it? But honestly, I've worked with some people where they're like, no, I don't do that. If you want a massage, here's the card for our massage therapist. If you want a massage, go get a massage. Here, we're just doing acupuncture. So that's kind of a different, it depends on what your style is and how you want to run your business. But that is another option. I do know that some people that if they run multiple treatment rooms, they will hire a massage therapist or an acupuncture assistant. They might hire somebody who's still in school to do Twina. So the patient comes in, the front desk person checks them in, the front desk person takes them to the treatment room, and then the assistant comes in and does some Twina to get them relaxed and kind of basically if the actual acupuncturist is running behind, that kind of fills up the time. So they're not just sitting there in the treatment room. Then the main acupuncturist comes in and does the needling, does the intake, does the needling, moves on to the next patient, and then sometimes they'll even have the assistant who comes in and removes the needle. Sometimes the head acupuncturist won't even remove the needle. So if you want that to be part of your workflow, you can do that. I always like to be with the patient the whole time, but that's why I only saw one patient every 90 minutes, and that is not a good way to make money. So you need to pay your rent. Yeah. What about knowing Chinese medicine, then trying Japanese and then Korean, always trying to learn? Yes. I think it depends on how you do it and kind of your attitude about it. So I think it's like, if you're drawn to those styles, it's perfectly okay to do those styles. If you, or like for me, I was reading Machiocha. I don't really like Machiocha. I don't like the approach of memorizing point prescriptions for Zongfu patterns. So I started reading Wang Juyi's Applied Channel Theory, and that kind of filled in some of the gaps. That in America, we learn a lot of Zongfu theory. We don't learn a lot of channel theory. So reading a book about channel theory helped to fill in those gaps. I guess what I'm saying is you don't want to jump from thing to thing, like just because you have shiny object syndrome. And I feel like that's what a lot of people do, is when they start to go into those styles, they're like, oh, TCM, that's too mainstream, I'm going to go off and do this other thing. Or they might, or what I've actually seen is they're like, this TCM we're learning, this Machiocha stuff we're learning, that's too hard, that takes a lot of work, I'm going to go learn this other style instead. And they're telling themselves a story that they think it's better, but it's really just they don't want to learn the other type. So I think like I said, there's nothing wrong with learning other styles or exploring other styles. It's just do it for the right reasons. Don't think that, oh, Machiocha is dumb, this stuff doesn't work, maybe if I go in this other direction, then I'll learn the secret. You're not going to learn the secret. If you do it for the right reasons, and then actually practice this style. Because that's another thing I see where it's like people took a 1 semester course in 5-element, and now they say, oh, I'm a 5-element practitioner. It's like, no, you're not. You can't call yourself a 5-element practitioner until you've gone to a 5-element school for 2 years and they give you a certificate. And so like actually, if you want to, same thing, if you were like, oh, I'm a Japanese style practitioner, the fact that you took a semester-long elective in Japanese style acupuncture doesn't make you a Japanese acupuncturist. The people who are really good and make it work spent years training and learning those fundamentals. So nothing wrong with other styles, but just do it for the right reasons and actually do it. Don't just think, oh, don't think you're gonna find the secret somewhere else, or that you can bypass the hard work of learning the fundamentals. Hi. From England/Israel. I feel like those are two very different places. Geographically, not like culturally, but geographically, those are two very different places. So that's cool that you're from both. Hopefully you're in one or the other and not both at the same time. I'd love to know a bit more about yin deficiency, specifically how it collapses into false heat. Does yin deficiency collapse into false heat? So normally when we say false heat, we're talking about something else. When we say false heat, we're talking about signs and symptoms that look like heat but are actually due to a cold pattern. So the full phrase would be false heat with true cold. So I think I talked about this in the 8-pattern diagnosis. We talked about false heat, and the example I would give is like, if your yang is deficient, sometimes that yang will float to the exterior and you might have symptoms of heat on the exterior, but the true condition is cold. So that would be false heat with true cold. So a person feels warm, they feel feverish, they have red skin, but when you look at their tongue, the tongue is pale. When you take the pulse is slow. So the internal condition is one of heat. When you see these signs of heat on the exterior, those are false signs of heat with true cold. So that's a little bit different. I'm not sure that we would actually say that yin deficiency would collapse into false heat. If you have yin deficiency, you have heat. It's true heat. When the yin is deficient, you have heat. So yin deficiency heat is like you don't have enough yin to cool you down, so you feel hot. So it's like if your air conditioner is broken, the system that's supposed to cool you down is broken, so you feel hot. The radiator in your car, your car has a radiator that circulates yin fluid around and cools the engine. If you don't have enough radiator fluid, your engine will overheat. If your radiator is broken, your engine will overheat. This is very different than your car caught on fire and now you have excess heat, excess fire. So you're like, why is my engine hot? Is it because I have too much heat, as in my engine is on fire? Or is it I have not enough yin, not enough cooling, like my radiator is broken? So that's what we mean by deficiency heat, is that there's not enough cooling, there's not enough yin fluid circulating around to cool things down. And that's what we mean by deficiency heat. But deficiency heat, when we say deficiency heat, we can say deficiency heat, vacuity heat, or empty heat. Those are all the same things, that there's not enough yin. When we say false heat, that's kind of something else. When we talk about false heat with true cold, maybe it depends on your translations. I think some people do try to translate shu as false, but I think I wouldn't go there when you talk about true versus false. Best study tips for Herbs 1. If you're in Herbs 1, share my screen. Does this still work? Does that button still work? Yes, it still works. Boop, boop, ba-doo. Sorry, I'm trying to resize I'm trying to resize my window. Come on, cursor. There we go, so we can actually see it. Go to tcmstudy.net. Go to Herbology. Herbology 1. There are lectures for every topic in herbology. I'm assuming this is your Herbology 1 covers the first third of herbs. Sometimes Herbology 1 might be intro to herbs, so I do have Herbology Intro to Herbology, and this is where we go over the basics of taste, temperature, entering channels, how you prepare the herbs, stir fry them in honey versus stir fry them in vinegar, and then we go through each of the categories, basically explaining the categories. When I was in school, that was Intro to Herbs. Herbology 1 is when we get into the actual herbs, herbs that release the exterior through herbs that drain dampness. So if you go here, there are videos for every category. There are slides for every category, so you can follow along with the slides. There are flashcards for the entire thing. I put the flashcards. Now you have to actually sign up for the email list to get the flashcard. So sorry, that's an annoying extra step. There are practice tests for each of them. What's the entering channels of Jingjie? Well, Jingjie releases the exterior, but I think we can also use it charred to stop bleeding, so it probably enters the lung channel, because the lung governs the exterior and the opening and closing of the pores, and the liver channel, the liver has something to do with blood. So yes, I'm correct. Here we say Jingjie releases the exterior and vents rashes. That's one of its specialties, is rashes. So it enters the lung channel. It's also used charred to stop bleeding, so it enters the liver channel. So you can go through these quizzes. and it will give you an explanation. Which one releases the exterior but also enters the do channel? This is very unusual that not a lot of herbs enter the do channel. So Gao Ben is really good for headache because the do channel goes up to the head, but it's also really good for pain in the low back because the do channel goes to the back. So there are quizzes for each of those. And then it's hard to see here. I might re-add it to this page, but if you go into the video thing where it has all this, it'll give you the slides, it'll give you the practice test, but you can also listen to it. You can either download the MP3 and listen to it on the go, or it will connect to Apple Podcasts or to Spotify. So if you go into Apple Podcasts or Apple Spotify, type in TCM Study, these herb lectures should show up. And so basically the Herbology 1 section is complete. I have all of the things for Herbology 1. I do not have all of the things for Herbology 2. So that's something I'm going to work on this semester. That I have if you're in Herbs 2, I have the first 2 categories. So starting on week 3, we're going to do a live streams on Saturdays of starting back up with herbs that transform phlegm cold. And so we'll do the same thing and complete Herbology 2 this semester. Then we'll get into Herbology 3 next semester. So if you're in Herbs 1, go to the website, go into Herbology 1. It's basically the entire semester for free. So that's a way to do it. If you want other tips for studying, go to the YouTube channel. Oh, look, there I am. I'm live. So meta. How should we search for this? Study Chinese herbs TCM? How to study Chinese herbs. There's a video for how to study Chinese herbs where it goes through some of the tips. So that's another thing you can look at is that's a video. It's one of the first videos I made, so it's like the quality is a little bit different. And so I in my early videos I gesture a lot and that annoys some people. That's why I'm gonna re-record the herb review courses, because I tend to gesture a lot because I'm trying to be emphatic and trying to be exciting, and other people are like, that's distracting. Please stop doing that. So that's another place you can go. But basically, I have the entire semester online here. So if you're in Herbs 1, share that with your friends. There are notes with photos. So if you want to do that, you can. You'll have notes with photos. You can either print those out or use those electronically and highlight things. Or you can download the flashcards that you can print out on index cards. So I made a focus light. I made a flashcard version of that. If you want to get it, you can download the flashcards and print them out and have them in flashcard form. That's something you can do. And then when you make sure you go down here to the very bottom for review, there's if you're doing the midterm, there's a category you can match by category. What category does Jurtsa belong to? Drains fire, tells you something about Jurtsa. Tianhuafen, what category does it belong to? So you can go through all that. And there's one for the midterm and the final, and then there's also herb ID. Ooh, what's that? Looks like a Huang. It looks yellow to me. I'm kind of colorblind, but it looks yellow. I think Huang Lian looks a little bit different. I'm going to say this is Huang Bai. Ooh, Huang Bai. Tells you what Huang Bai is. Ooh, it's been a while since I've gone through these. The little pieces, Fong Fong. So that's another thing you can do when you have to do your herb ID. That's something you can practice. Like just if you're sitting around with nothing to do and you're on your phone, you can go on mobile and go to that and practice your herb ID. Sorry, I just spent like 20 minutes plugging my website, so that's how I do it. If you want more specific tips, go watch the YouTube video where we talk about how to make connections. Also trying to learn more about dizziness. I feel like it's confusing and complex to treat. Yes, it is, because there's a lot of things that can cause dizziness. Maybe there's not enough clear yang rising to the head, so there's not enough nourishing the head, so you feel dizzy. Maybe there's too much turbid stuff rising up to the head, and that's why you feel dizzy. So maybe there's not enough qi going up, and that can cause dizziness. Maybe there's blood deficiency, not enough blood nourishing the head, and that causes dizziness. Maybe you have turbid phlegm, and that's causing dizziness and Shen disturbance. Maybe you have wind, or just wind by itself, or wind phlegm, and that that can cause dizziness. So there are a lot of things that cause it. For those specific things, I would make sure that you get like a book that's like a... There are books that break this stuff down. So there are a couple... They just came out with a new one. Chinese handbook. Did you say Chinese handcuffs? I kind of want Chinese handcuffs now. I want to see what is a Chinese handcuff? Is that like a finger? Those are finger cuffs, not handcuffs. Anyway, don't look for Chinese handcuffs. Look for Chinese handbook of internal medicine. Is that what it's called? Yeah, this one. Oh, Clinical Handbook of Internal Medicine. Sorry. Yeah, so they used to have it with this one where it was divided up into different volumes, and that was actually really annoying. I'm glad it's the same authors, but they combined it into one. Oh, they do this. I hate this flexi-bound thing. I like the hardcover versions, but I guess now they only make the flexi-bound. So this is one where it's like, it basically lists a bunch of diseases and then gives you a pattern breakdown. So the other thing you can do, I don't have it here, but there's we call it the Machiocha Gold. Machiocha Handbook. Probably just can't type in Machiocha Gold. Not the foundations, not that. There's a gold, not the channels one. I forget what it's called. But Machiocha has a similar one where basically it lists a bunch of diseases and then tells you the patterns. So if you get a book like that, you can just turn to the chapter on dizziness and it will outline all those patterns. Qi deficiency, blood deficiency, yang failing to rise, phlegm, wind phlegm. Not the channels of acupuncture. Come on, there's I guess they don't have it. There's another one. Practice of Chinese medicine. That's what I was trying to get to. Is this out of print? The Practice of Chinese Medicine. That's another one where he just goes through every disease and gives you the Zongfu pattern diagnosis for each disease. So if you're looking for something specific like that and you want to understand it, those kind of books really break it down into the etiology, what causes dizziness, pathomechanism, how does it come about, and then it will get into the different treatment strategies based on patterns. How do you break down the different patterns? How do you know which pattern it is? And then once you break it down into the pattern, what points do you use and what herbal formulas do you use? So whenever people ask specific questions like that, I'm kind of just like, go read that book. That's something you could use in your practice. How do you not get tired giving so much Twina for your patients? I'm big and I'm strong. I hope that didn't sound offensive. Speaking of Bagua, I think I said something about Bagua Zhong before. I used to do Bagua in San Diego. So, there's Bill Helm and the Taoist Sanctuary is right there in like North Park Hillcrest. Next to, like very, very next to that, there's this really hidden little spot that's, it says like Kung Fu and Circus Arts. I'm not sure if it's still there. I haven't been there in 10 years, but it was this guy that his wife was a contortionist, so they did like circus arts, but he did Bagua. Anyway, there's a guy I did Bagua with. This very large, intimidating fellow. We'd sometimes do it in the park, in Balboa Park. And so you'd see this big guy come up. He's carrying a staff. He's like walking up, and then he turns around and sets down this like pink Hello Kitty backpack. It was hilarious. There's this big guy with this very deep James Earl Jones voice. And so once I was talking to him about, he's also a massage therapist, and he did massage for like 10 years. And I thought like, oh, that's really cool that you've done massage for so long. That I know a lot of people get burnt out after just doing a couple years of massage. And he was like, they don't know what I know. They don't train how I train. I do Kung Fu just to strengthen my hands and strengthen my grip. I don't use my elbows because you can't feel anything. So I train to use my hands. A lot of these people, they think you can just do yoga. when you walk in that door, you got to be strong from head to toe. You can't just do yoga. And so that was kind of his, again, not trying to knock yoga people, but if you want to do massage and you want to do it a long time, you have to be strong. And so this is another thing. When I actually asked a female massage therapist about this, when I said it seems like really common that people get burnt out, or that people have trouble, especially doing deep tissue. They're like, oh, I do deep tissue and I need to take a break because I'm so tired. And this is a woman, like, she kind of did CrossFit, but like, she deadlifted. She was strong. She was full body strong. And so she's like, no, I've never had problems getting worn out doing massage. But that's because she was lifting weights that just holding on to the weights develops your grip strength. And she was strong from head to toe. She didn't just do yoga. She actually lifted weights. Now I feel especially bad since it actually says yoga in the name. Sorry about that. Didn't mean to knock yoga. Yoga's really great. But yeah, I think it's one of those things where if you want to do, like, if you want to do it long term, it might behoove you to train your body in a way that you have the strength to actually do that. And if you can't do that, you could find an alternative. So like, I know people that they do shiatsu, they do the stuff with their feet because that way they don't need to use their hands or be strong. But for me, like I said, I'm 200 pounds, so if I want to do deep tissue, I just kind of lean a little bit. And like, doing Twina doesn't, even when I do a lot of grasping, I do a lot of grasping on the traps and stuff like that. And it's like, and people are like, oh, your grip is really strong. It's like, yeah, I drive a motorcycle, that strengthens my grip. I deadlift a lot of weight, that strengthens my grip. I've done other things outside of massage to strengthen myself. And so doing that kind of stuff is no big deal. Boop, boop, ba-doo. I started massage therapy too. Yeah, and it's kind of like, talk about healing holistically, and I think it kind of depends on what you do. Like, there are some people that, like, they're Twina, they specialize in Twina, and they can do a lot of amazing things. When you go deep in one thing, you can do a lot of amazing things. So, but yeah, I think sometimes it's just easier to use needles. Yeah, and then yeah, so prepping with Twina is something I always like to do. Hi, Heidi from Chicago. Hope everything's going well in Chicago. Hi from Pacific Northwest. I want to cut down trees in the Pacific Northwest. I met some people from Oregon, and they were talking about, like, in Colorado, all our trees are tall and skinny. This is going to be kind of offensive, but it turns out that loggers and sawyers are very, very offensive. Like, look up the term school marm. They like to describe certain trees using the term school marm, and that's not a very nice thing. But our trees are very tall and skinny, and they call them pecker poles. So in Colorado, we have a lot of tall, skinny trees, but in the Pacific Northwest, they have like these really big trees where you need the big chainsaw to cut them down. So I kind of want to go cut down trees in the Pacific Northwest. And to be clear, when I say I want to cut down trees, what I mean is for the purposes of fire mitigation. So usually it's like after a fire has gone through and we need to clear out the trees, or to prevent fires. It's like basically we've not cut down forests for a long time and the forests are overgrown, and that's why the fires are so bad. So when I say cut down trees, it's not that I hate trees and I hate nature. It's because we're trying to save the forest. We're trying to prevent forest fires. Top 3 books you feel each TCM practitioner should know. Study your textbooks. I feel like that gets overlooked a lot. And so, like, even just going into something like Deadman. So there's kind of a problem with Deadman. Can we focus? I think that a lot of people are introduced to Deadman very early on, like in their first semester, and it's kind of like, when you're first starting out, that can be overwhelming. It's like if you're in your first semester of acupuncture, it's like reading 10 pages of commentary on LI4 is probably boring and overwhelming. if you've been doing acupuncture for 5 years, reading 10 pages of commentary on LI4 is actually really exciting and really interesting, and you can get a lot from it. So it'd be like, read your textbooks when you just read Materia Medica. If you actually go through and read all that commentary, there's a lot of interesting stuff in there. And it's not just about learning the herbs. That can actually help you learn the other aspects of the medicine. So if you're like, what is the cause of bleeding? Why is this menopausal woman bleeding so much? It's like you can learn that theory by learning the herbs. The other one I always recommend, it's on my shelf over there, is the Wang Juyi's Applied Channel Theory. So I think I should have that in the description of this. It's like my favorite book, so I always say, this is my favorite book on Chinese medicine. So there might be a link to that in the description. Let's see, can I do I have a view post? No. So it's probably in the description of this. Otherwise, go to Applied Channel Theory in Chinese Medicine. This is my best and most... Oh, see, I purchased this item on January 9th, 2011. So it's like 12 years ago. I bought this book 12 years ago, and it's still my favorite book in Chinese medicine. If you don't like Amazon, go to Eastland Press. And they have it there. Oh, look, it's on sale there. They have specials of the week. So if you want to do it every week, they have a few books that are 20% off. So if you want to get it cheaper, go to Eastland Press and get it there. If you're from Eastland Press, email me. I want to sell your books. I'd rather go through you than go through Amazon. So if you're from Eastland Press, send me an email or respond to the email I sent you. Oh, I lost my place in the comments. Your lecture on 8 principle. I'm glad that video helped. So it just came out with a video on 8 principle pattern diagnosis. That's something that a lot of people have been asking about. So I went ahead and made a video about it. Hi from Miami. Hope everything's going well in Florida. Okay, born in England but studying in Israel. Okay, yeah, but that's really cool. The circuit between the ministerial fire and the emperor fire. So when we say the emperor fire, we're talking about the heart yang. When we say ministerial fire, that can mean a couple different things. Somebody like the Sanjiao does stuff with a ministerial fire. I always I try to interpret in terms of the Mingmen fire, the fire of the kidneys. That may not be entirely correct, but it's kind of like there has to be some communication between the kidneys and the heart. So I did make a video on Tianwang Buxindan about kidney and heart communicating, but it's kind of like there are these two fires that have to communicate. So if one gets deficient, then the other one can get deficient, or one can flare up and things like that. So it's usually when we're talking about this, we're just talking about the ministerial fire can flare up and affect the heart and the heart shen. But if you're talking about something deeper, I'd have to go in and look about specifically what we're talking about. I remember Jingjie sounds like ginger, and most ginger have skin sensitivity. That's kind of clever. I like that. Another one is Jingjie. I believe is actually the common term is Japanese catnip. So with Jingjie, I think about basically, I think about cats. It's Japanese cat. I don't know what Japanese catnip is, or if like cats in Japan really like Jingjie versus American cat. I don't know what that means. I just know it's sometimes called Japanese catnip. And so I think of cats like either someone being allergic to cats and so their skin breaks out, or I think that cats like to scratch and claw at things and that causes you to bleed. So that's like Jingjie is also good for stopping bleeding. So I think about Jingjie and cats. Thank you so much for offering these study tools for free. Yes, that was kind of the goal, is to give away as much for free as possible. If you want to support the website and the channel, there are a couple ways you can do it. Best way is joining the Patreon. And that's like a monthly pledge. It's kind of like the PBS model of, I started actually saying that on the videos. I hope PBS doesn't sue me when I say these videos are brought to you by students like you. So that's one way you can support the channel, is by joining the Patreon. You can also give a one-time donation through Buy Me a Coffee, or a lot of times on the YouTube videos, there's now a super thanks button, and that way you can make a donation directly through YouTube. I think that YouTube actually takes a larger percentage of that. They're taking like, I don't remember what it is, but it's like 25 or 30%. So I think Buy Me a Coffee is actually, I keep a larger percentage of that. But the super thanks might be easier for you. Practice of TCM. Thanks, Casper. I should have been reading the comments instead of like typing out. Machiocha knows, or Casper knows which Machiocha I'm talking about. Oh, he says the Bagua people. Yeah, so that's the guy who we're talking about, the kung fu place next to the Taoist sanctuary. So I think it's like if you drive down, it's not University. I don't remember what that crossroad is, but if you drive down that street, Bill Helm runs the Taoist sanctuary. I'm assuming that's there. And it was kind of funny, like he has this big banner that says "Relax" in like big capital letters, and I always thought that was kind of funny and ironic, or like "Calm down" in large bold letters. Next to that, there's a very small kung fu school, and the guy who teaches there is legit. So if you want to learn real martial arts, the guy who teaches there is legit. He's like the people there are not like, oh yeah, I wanna get in shape, and like I feel like a lot of martial arts, especially like Tai Chi classes, it's kind of like a social event, especially for older people. It's a way to get out of the house and move around a little bit, and it's kind of nice to sit around and talk to people before class, and then you do some Tai Chi, and it's very relaxing. Whereas this guy is like, I am training my body to be a weapons system. And so it's really intense. It's really hardcore. It's like when you know how to fight, it's not a dial. It's not a dial where you can turn it up or turn it down. It's an on-off. So like the guy's really intense, and he's one of those people that he practices for hours a day for 20 years, and so he's really good at stuff. And like when I was there, some of the other students there, they were like building kung fu, like the 28 chambers or whatever of kung fu. They were building that stuff in their backyard. He's like, I have practice dummies in my backyard that I go to every day. So if you're interested in Bagua Zhong, that's a good place to go. Boop boop ba-doo. First week of acupuncture school. Awesome. Good luck on the new semester. It seems like herbs, points, etc. is a lot easier for me to learn, but the slew of signs, symptoms for pattern diagnosis is so daunting. Any tips and tricks, methods for studying Zong Fu patterns? So this is kind of a general thing that it's kind of weird to make this statement, but I say that it's easier to understand things than to memorize things. And I think there's a quote by Richard Feynman where he says something like that. It's easier to understand principles than to memorize. I don't remember exactly how it goes. And it's kind of ironic to say that, because really in the beginning in Chinese medicine, you just have to memorize things. You just have to memorize the big picture. You just have to memorize things. But hopefully you get to the point where you can start, once you have the basics memorized, you can start understanding things. So when it comes to pattern diagnosis, I would look at it that way of try to understand what's going on with this pattern. That if you know the functions of the spleen, you know what the spleen is supposed to do, then it should become apparent what happens when these things go wrong. So if you know that the spleen is responsible for digestion, if you have spleen qi deficiency, there's not enough energy to digest the food, to rot and ripen the food, so you get crappy digestion, you get poor digestion, loose stools because the spleen is not transforming the food, you get abdominal distension because the spleen is not transforming the food. So those signs and symptoms should make sense when you understand the function of the spleen. The spleen is supposed to raise the clear yang. So if the spleen is deficient, it can't raise the clear yang, so you get sinking conditions. That when the spleen digests the food, it uses that raw material to create blood. So spleen qi deficiency can lead to blood deficiency, especially heart blood deficiency. So that's what I mean there. So if you understand the functions of it, then the patterns should become apparent. When you look at the lung has a function of diffusion. It's supposed to spread things outward, especially in the upper body, and spread things to the skin and spread things to the face. That's what we mean when we say that the lung diffuses qi or disseminates qi. But also the lung has a function of depurative downbearing, that when you breathe in the clear qi from the air, it's supposed to send that qi downward. So if there's something obstructing the lung, it's going to obstruct those functions. So if you have a wind-cold pathogen obstructing the lung, the qi can't go down, it's going to rebel back upwards. If you have a wind-heat pathogen, if you have phlegm obstructing the lung, the qi can't go downward, it comes back upwards. The lung governs the exterior and the opening and the closing of the pores. So if lung qi is deficient, the sweat's going to leak out because it's not the pores, the Zhou Li isn't firm. So that's my advice there, is try to understand how you get from point A to point B. Understand this is the functions that the lung is supposed to do. When things go wrong, this is what happens. When the lung gets attacked by evils, this is what's going to happen. The lung is the upper source of water. The lung governs the water passages. So if you get a wind-cold pathogen obstructing the lung, it can't move the water, and so you get edema in the upper body, you get swelling in the face. Understand how you get from point A to point B, and that's how I would look at Zongfu pattern diagnosis. Also, a big part of this is going to be tongue and pulse, so try to understand why, again, how you get from point A to point B. So when we say the pulse is thin, why is the pulse thin? The pulse is thin because there's not enough yin and not enough blood to fill the vessel. That's why the pulse feels small in diameter. So that's why yin deficiency and blood deficiency has a thin pulse. The pulse is floating. Why does the pulse float? Well, the depth of the pulse tells you the depth of the yang qi. So if you have a floating pulse, that means the yang qi is on the surface, on the exterior. Why is it there? Well, there are two reasons. One, you have an exterior attack, so the yang qi rises to meet it. That's why you feel the pulse on the surface. The other reason is the yin is deficient. When yin can't anchor the yang qi floats to the outside, so that's why you have a floating pulse. So it's either you have an external attack or you have yin deficiency. But if you understand those mechanisms, it becomes easier to understand. When you have a cracked tongue, what causes cracks in the tongue? Basically, there's not enough fluid. So think about when you have like some dirt or some soil and the soil dries out, you'll start to see cracks in the soil. The same thing is happening on your tongue. If you don't have enough fluids, the tongue will dry out and you'll start to see cracks. That's why cracks are a sign of yin deficiency or fluid deficiency. Looking at the cracks, looking at the position and the orientation can tell you whether that's stomach yin deficiency or kidney yin deficiency, or heart yin deficiency. But the general statement, a crack means there's not enough fluids. Think about dirt drying out. So if you can kind of understand those mechanisms, I think that makes it a lot easier to memorize. And I think that's why people like my videos, is because I try to point those things out as much as possible. A lot of times when you have teachers, especially teachers who are trained in China, they tend not to make those connections. They tend to just say, memorize these things because that's the way they learned it. But see if you can try to go past that and figure out, why is this happening? I'm starting to lose my voice. I think we might not be able to do that much longer. Oh, we're getting past an hour. So let's see if there's any last things. Oh, do you think it's important to have a feng shui set up in your clinic? This might be a long one. So, I do know some people who are into feng shui. Patrick, when I do the podcast, do I have a podcast button? If you go to podcast.tcmstudy.net, I do some stuff with one of the people I interview a lot is my friend Patrick. He's really into feng shui, he'll put like gold coins under the welcome mat. He has a frog pointing towards the cash register because he believes that that's a feng shui thing, that if you have a frog there, and he believes like that's why he makes money, is because there's a frog pointing at his cash register. I don't believe in that, but I do believe that your environment has an effect on your state of mind. So when I first made my clinics when I was in San Diego, when I first opened my office, I put a lot of thought into how I wanted the space to look. I was not doing that in terms of feng shui. I was doing that in terms of trying to make a calm, relaxing space. And so I noticed that that had an effect on people. That when people came in, I would say at least 80% of my patients commented on the space. They'd say, this is a really nice space. This is a really nice office. I'd say of those people, 50% commented on how the space made them feel. Like they would come in and say, this is really nice. Just being here makes me feel relaxed. And so I think that's important. Was I doing it according to traditional feng shui? No. In fact, I actually had feng shui people come in and say, oh yeah, you should like turn that fountain around and have it pointing the other direction because otherwise your chi is flowing out the door. I'm like, that's stupid. I'm not going to turn my fountain backwards. That's going to look ugly. So did I do that? No. But is it important to have a relaxing space? I think so. And so I guess there's this saying from Red Letter Media I like where they would talk about movies and they say, you may not have noticed, but your brain noticed. And so in terms of do I think that putting a frog next to your cash register is going to have an effect? No, but there are certain things that when you set up your space, the person might not consciously be aware of it, but the details that are entering their brain makes them feel a certain way, and it's important to keep that in mind. So like the space being clean is more important than the feng shui to me. The space being organized is more important. Having plants, having water, things like that were important to me just to create a relaxing space. I wasn't following the rules of feng shui, but I was trying to think of... Sorry, I got distracted by cats like things that... Yeah, that's the jing jie. Cats like things that jingle. Oh, awesome. Some of Wang Ji's students are doing in-person seminars in San Diego. That's cool. I think they also have a podcast. So if you want to get into it, that's cool. Have you had experience in a Chinese hospital? No, I haven't. A lot of my teachers would go to China and take students with them, and so they got that experience of spending 3 weeks in a Chinese hospital. Whenever I tried to do that, the trip got canceled at the last minute, so I haven't been able to do that. Any audiobooks you recommend? I haven't found a lot of great ones. Do I have a link down here? This is going to get real meta for a sec. If we go here, show more, free audiobooks. So this is like the free audio trial. So one is The Spark in the Machine. And so that's something you can read about. And then I think there's some other ones that are audiobooks, but last I've looked, there are not a lot of audiobooks, and I kind of wish there were more. It's like I kind of want to actually just email some people and be like, can I read your book? Can I produce your audiobook? I have a good audio setup. I will read your book just so it will be an audiobook because we need more audiobooks. Have you got a favorite acupuncture point? It's very English of you. That's just a thing I noticed when I was in like Belgium learning English. Though in Europe, when they learn English as a foreign language, they learn the Queen's English, not American English. So Americans will say, "Do you have?" and British people will say, "Have you got?" No, not really. It depends. There are some like point combinations I tend to go to, like pericardium 6. I really like the combination liver 5, pericardium 6, which you can read about in the Wang Jui book. It's the Luo connecting point on the foot Jue Yin combined with the Luo connecting point on the hand Jue Yin. So some people are really into 4 gates. I usually use that more often than I use 4 gates, but it kind of depends on the person. Chronic fatigue. It's difficult. So it's like kind of with some of these things is like rather than trying to break down each disease, sometimes I'm just like straight up like, I don't know. I'm just going to treat the pattern, treat the constitution. And then sometimes that magically works out, and that's the magic of Chinese medicine. So chronic fatigue, it sounds like it would be some sort of deficiency, but you'd have to differentiate between qi deficiency, blood deficiency, yang deficiency, things like that. And it's usually, if it's chronic fatigue in a Western setting, it's probably going to be very complex, as in there are a lot of different things going on, just because Americans or Westerners' lives are so fucked up with their sleep, their diet, their exercise or lack thereof, the type of medications they're taking. So it does become very complicated is a thing. And sometimes I think it could be even like, it's very easy to go to deficiency. It could be maybe there's excess dampness weighing them down. So it could be that tonifying them won't actually help. Maybe you need to get rid of dampness. So I don't know. Again, I would have to look in one of the books to see if that's actually, that might be difficult because I think that's not a Chinese named disease, so it might not be in some of those handbooks, but it could be that the clinical handbook might have something, so I might check there. Zhong qi deficiency. There's Zhong qi, Zhong qi, so many types of qi. It's not. That was speaking about the other question. Yeah, the feng shui question. So. Oh, Zhong qi deficiency is the most common for fatigue. Yes. Yeah. So I mean, it makes sense that like, if you don't have enough qi, you can't be active and motive. That's like the whole point of qi. That's one of the functions of qi, is to activate and to transform. And if you don't have enough qi, then you're going to feel tired. So that is the most common. But I think it's like, if you don't have enough blood nourishing the body, then you're going to feel tired. If you don't have enough yang warming things up, then you're going to feel tired. If you have too much dampness weighing you down, then you're going to feel tired. And a lot of times these things play into each other. And so that's why you're going to have to just look at the basic signs and symptoms, look at the tongue and pulse, and try to figure it out from there. But it is likely to be, if you're dealing with a Westerner with those types of things, it is likely to be very complex, where it's like, oh, I have spleen qi deficiency, and that's causing dampness, and that's causing the liver to overact. But because the spleen is deficient, then I end up with blood deficiency, and then there's not enough yang from the kidney warming the spleen, and so it tends to be a very complex thing. So sorry, I can't give you more advice on that. I would have to like see a specific patient. So I think that's about it. I was planning on just doing an hour and then calling it quits and going and working on some other things. So we might call it there unless anybody has some last minute questions. But thank you for being here. We're going to try to do this as a weekly thing for this semester. I think what I'm going to do is, I'm not doing it this week, but I want to do like on Fridays, just do a free-for-all Q&A sort of thing, maybe do a rant at the beginning, because I like to rant and yell about things, but then just do Q&A on Friday. And then Saturday will be some sort of live lecture. So it could be, next week we'll do some intro to tongue diagnosis, because a lot of people are asking about that. Then afterwards we'll get into weekly single herb lectures, because I want to finish up that that section of the website, my Herbology 2. So if you're in Herbology 2, your first 2 weeks should be covered, and then after that we'll start up doing the herbs things and get some of that herb stuff covered. So that's the plan going forward. Besides that, I'm re-recording. I've been re-recording some of the videos for the formula review course. I think I have like one more section for that. I have to do the phlegm category. Then I'll be done recording the formula review course. Then I want to go back, and my next priority is to re-record the videos for the single herb course, the single herb review course, just because that was one of the first. That was the first time I made a course, and The feedback I've gotten is people say it's good, but I kind of want to re-record it and break it up a little bit more just to make it a little bit better. So the content will stay the exact same. It's just I want to re-record to have better video quality on that. So that's what I'm doing for the next couple weeks, and then after that we'll get into going through the rest of the channels. So in the channels and points section. The lung one is good. We have large intestine and stomach, but I'm probably gonna re-record those because again, that's like one of the first videos I ever recorded, and it's real awkward. Is it even going? It's real. Yeah, I think this one is the one that has like music in the background, because it's like, that's what you do with YouTube videos is you put music in the background, and everyone's like, why the fuck do you have music in the background? It's really distracting. I think it's the stomach one that's like really awkward. Where it's like, it takes a while to like develop like camera presence and being comfortable on camera, and this one you can tell like I'm not very comfortable on camera, so we'll probably re-record that and then get into some of the other ones. Spleen is good, heart is good, small intestine is good. UB I'm probably gonna skip just because it's, I don't know, I'll probably do UB. I might do the yin channels first. Liver channel was a live one. I might re-record that because it's an hour and 25 minutes long. I might redo that so it's a little bit shorter, but basically that's kind of the plan going forward is finish up the herb stuff because I need to pay my rent, and the herb courses are how I make the most money. So I'm gonna re-record those herb videos and then do some promotional stuff for those herb review courses because I'm poor and I need money. And then after that we'll go into the finishing up those acupuncture videos. So that might be like, realistically, that's going to be at least 2 weeks from now, possibly a month from now, before those other acupuncture videos start coming out. I forget where I was going with that, but that's kind of the plan going forward. Thanks for being here. If you want to support the channel and the website, join the Patreon. Make a donation through Buy Me a Coffee. Sign up for the email list. The email list is like you'll get updates about when new videos come out, when the live streams are happening, and again, like I said, some special stuff about some special articles like study tips for opening a practice, book reviews, things like that. That'll be part of the email list. So sign up for the email, follow me on Instagram, swipe right on Tinder. I'm going to go see my cat. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next week. Yeah, usually it's just like, oh, I still have the thing up here. Why is this here? Oh, I remember. It's when I was doing something else. Yeah, usually it's just like after an hour of talking, my voice gets tired, and if I just go drink some tea for 2 hours, it'll come back. So thanks for spreading the word. Yeah, a lot of this stuff comes through word of mouth. So if you find stuff, like browse around the website, tcmstudy.net, and if you find stuff you like, share it with your friends, share it with your study group. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next time.